We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we proceed, I would like to turn the meeting over to an outstanding student who will receive the President's Award tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the dais Bernie Loya from Hanks.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. My name is Bryn Loya, and I'm a senior at Hanks High School. It is an honor to call this meeting to order. Thank you.
Yep. I know. Good evening and welcome to the Ysleta Independent School District meeting of Board of Trustees. The meeting of Board of Trustees is a meeting of the board that is the public is allowed to attend. As provided by Ysleta Independent School District policy, we invite members of the public to make comments during the citizens' input portion to start the meeting. Legally, the board may listen but may not enter discussion on matters of citizens' input. We remind everyone that this is a board meeting often attended by students and often attended by students. We ask that we all conduct ourselves in a manner that best represents the values and traditions of the Ysleta Independent School District. This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 6:06. We have a quorum with Mr. Sotero Ramirez, Mr. Shane Haggerty, Mr. Mike Rosales, Ms. Connie Woodruff, and myself, Charlie Bustillos. Trustee Lucero and Trustee Ochoa are unable to attend, but are excused. Now for the Pledge of Allegiance. The colors tonight are being presented by Junior ROTC Color Guard from Riverside High School. Color Guard Commander is Cadet David Villanueva. The other Color Guard members are Cadet Diego Rivera, Cadet Juan Pablo, Cadet Ernesto Cleto. The pledge leader is Cadet Evelyn Bueno of Riverside High School. Will you please stand for the presentation of colors and the recite of the Pledge of Allegiance, the Texas Pledge of Allegiance, and a moment of silence. Please remain standing until the cadets have departed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, please join me in the pledge to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Order. Arms. Post. Colors. Ready, set, post.
Dr. De La Torre, do we have any recognitions and introductions this evening?
Good evening, Vice President Bustillo's board and esteemed guests. Yes, Mr. Martinez, our Associate Superintendent of Public Relations, will lead our recognitions and introductions this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. De La Torre. We have 3 recognitions for you this evening. At this time, we ask Vice President Bustillos to please come to the front of the dais for the first 2 recognitions. Audience members, please remain seated until recognitions are complete. Thank you. Our first recognition is in honor of Hanks High School student Bryn Loya, who has proven herself as a leader among her peers for her commitment to service excellence, particularly when it comes to helping those in need during the Thanksgiving season. For the past 2 years, Bryn has served as president of Hanks Interact, a community service club known best for organizing the annual Hanks Giving. This event involves fundraising and collecting items year-round to provide 500 Thanksgiving meals for families in need and local shelters. Normally, the group collaborates with all schools in the Hanks feeder pattern, but in 2021, Ysleta and Riverside High Schools were also included, as well as other student council groups from across the city. Bryn, along with her peers and sponsor, put in thousands of hours to ensure the Thanksgiving tradition stays alive at the Kingdom. She is a wonderful example of service excellence at Ysleta ISD, and we honor her considerable contributions with the January 2022 President's Award. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our President's Award winner, Hanks High School senior, Bryn Loya. Bryn is accompanied by Principal Ruben Cadena. Let's hear it one more time for Bryn. The next recognition is in honor of Riverside High School football coach and athletic director Gary Ricoder, who has been named the 2021 District 14A Division I Coach of the Year and the El Paso Times 2021 Coach of the Year for a stellar football season that included capturing district by district and area championships and reached the regional semifinals with a win-loss record of 11-2. Under Coach Ricoder's leadership, the Rangers won 2 playoff games in 2021 for the first time since 2004 and scored a record number of points in a single season to win their first district and area championships in 16 years. In addition, 6 players were selected for the Greater El Paso Football Coaches Association All-Star Team. Congratulations to Coach Ricoder on this outstanding achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the District 14A Division I Coach of the Year, Riverside High School Coach Gary Ricoder. He is accompanied by Principal Maribel Guillen. Let's hear it again for Coach Ricoder and the Riverside Rangers. Our next recognition honors the hardest working volunteers in the district, our Board of Trustees. Board members are strong advocates for public education who work to create the educational environment we want for our students, and we deeply value the guidance, commitment, and dedication they bring to Ysleta ISD. At this time, we are inviting students from each learning community to provide their trustee with a gift basket and personal words of appreciation. We will start from my left to right. First, we have District 4, the Eastwood area. Mr. Rosales, would you please come to the front of the dais? Here to represent Eastwood High School is student Alexis Amaya, accompanied by Eastwood Middle School student Andrea Torres and Edgemere International School student Madeline Springfield.
Good evening. My name is Alexis Amaya, and I'm the proud student body president of Eastwood High School. Theodore Roosevelt has defined a man as one who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. Our learning community is proud to be represented by a man of such great character and immense dedication as Mr. Rosales. Without hesitation, he provides nothing but support for our endeavors. Although we could never truly express our enormous gratitude for Mr. Rosales, our gift basket tonight serves as a small token of appreciation for our great leader. Thank you so much for all you have done for the troopers of the past, present, and future in our community.
Let's hear it again for the troopers. Next, we have District 2, the Bel Air area. Ms. Woodruff, would you please come to the front of the dais? Representing Bel Air High School is student McKenna Younger. She is accompanied by Bel Air Middle School student David Alvarado and Sageland Elementary School student Noah Garcia.
Good evening, YISD family. I am McKenna Younger, the proud student body at Bel Air High School. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. These words by Mahatma Gandhi tells us that by putting ourselves ahead of others, we are able to find our true sense of self. No one has done this better than our board member, Mrs. Connie Woodruff. She is the strongest beam of support in our tight-knit community. With her presence and constant encouragement, we have been able to reach great new heights. From athletics to the classroom, the music room, and everything in between, Mrs. Woodruff plays an integral part in strengthening the connection with schools around our community. She has truly shown what it means to find yourself in helping others. The One Red community is eternally grateful for all she has done to help us succeed. Mrs. Woodruff, from our hearts to yours, thank you.
Let's hear it again for the Highlanders. Next, we have District 7, the Del Valle area. Unfortunately, Ms. Lucetta wasn't able to attend tonight's meeting, but here to honor her service is Del Valle High School student Michael Lopez, accompanied by Del Valle Middle School student Remy Baron and Lancaster Elementary School student Annabelle Rosiles.
Good evening. My name is Michael Lopez, Student Council President at Del Valle High School. What an honor it is to be here as we recognize the accomplishments of our great Board of Trustees. It is a pleasure to congratulate and thank Ms. Catherine R. Lucero, our Del Valle Area Trustee and Board Secretary, for her hard work and dedication to the district. It is through the leadership of this school board and that we are able to excel in academics, athletics, and the fine arts. I will soon graduate from the finest district across the region, and for that, I am blessed to have been a part of something amazing. Thank you again to Ms. Lucero and the entire Board of Trustees. They are the reason I am here today, sharing this great honor. One family, one destiny. Thank you.
Let's hear it again for the Conquistadores. Next, we have District 5, the Hanks area. Unfortunately, Mr. Ochoa, president of the board, was unable to attend tonight's meeting, but here to honor his service is Hanks High School student Aaron Regalado, accompanied by Hanks Middle School student Mauricio Higuera and Ariel Washington International School student Jacob Maciel.
It is my pleasure to be here tonight to recognize and honor Mr. Ochoa and our Board of Trustees. His devotion to the district and his passion for education is evident in everything he does. During some of the toughest years in education, Mr. Ochoa has supported and appreciated our educators. It is because of this that he is one of the best advocates for our students, our teachers, and our administrators. Mr. Ochoa demonstrates his trust in our teachers by leading Mr. Ochoa trusts in our teachers and leaders by enrolling his children's and now grandchildren's in our schools of this great learning community. We appreciate his unconditional love and the selfless ways he gives up his time to help improve our community. I speak on behalf of all current and future Knights when I say we are very fortunate to have Mr. Ochoa as our board member. As we say at the Kingdom, we love you and there's nothing you could do about it.
Let's hear it again for the Knights. Next, we have District 1, the Riverside area. Mr. Bustillos, would you please come to the front of the dais? Here to represent Riverside High School is student Yesenia Garcia, accompanied by Riverside Middle School student Ava Gonzalez and Ascarate Elementary School student Armando Valdivienzo.
Good evening. Tonight I have the honor of recognizing our trustee, Mr. Carlos Bustillos, for his hard work and dedication to our students, schools, and community. When COVID-19 hit, things went into a spiral. So many activities and events came to an abrupt halt. But Mr. Bustillos, you and the board continued working hard to ensure Ysleta ISD schools and students continue to thrive. We understand how difficult this job is, and we thank you for all that you do to ensure we all succeed. Please know that your hard work does not go unnoticed. You are a very valuable member of our Riverside family, and we are so appreciative of you. Thank you for everything you have done and continue to do for us.
Let's hear it again for the Rangers. Next, we have District 6, the Ysleta area. Mr. Ramirez, would you please come to the front of the dais? From Ysleta High School, we have student Emilio Lopez Baeza, accompanied by Rio Bravo Middle School student Brisa Garcia Ramos and Capistrano Elementary School student Ana Yasmin Hernandez.
It is always a great day to be an Indian. As the tools and skills needed to adapt to an ever-changing world evolve, Ysleta's spirit of excellence is evident in our teachers, students, and staff, who work tirelessly to ensure future generations experience a legacy of pride. But these efforts would not be possible without leaders like Mr. Sotero Ramirez. He is an Ysleta High School graduate, but as a trustee, he advocates for all students throughout the district. He constantly seeks out the best way to provide students with the best educational experience. Mr. Ramirez, we thank you for attending school events, visiting campuses, and taking the time to recognize staff with a smile and a simple hello. Thank you for sharing our vision of excellence, and we look forward to your continued service. From one Indian to another, once an Indian, always an Indian.
Let's hear it again for the Indians. Next, we have District 3, the Parkland area. Mr. Haggerty, would you please come to the front of the dais? Representing Parkland High School is Andrew Castro. He is accompanied by Parkland Middle School student Azro Rios Carroll and Parkland Elementary School student Austin Salzman.
The Parkland area community would like to thank our trustee, Mr. Shane Haggerty. Mr. Haggerty has always shown immeasurable support from our campuses, from football games to T-STEM competitions and recitals at Parkland Pre-K. Mr. Haggerty is always there for us. We deeply appreciate the pride and support that you provide our area students, faculty, and staff. You are truly the heart of the Northeast, and you are everything that school board members should be for the communities they serve. We are forever grateful for your time and efforts to ensure the Parkland area is supported and thriving. Once again, thank you for everything you have done and continue to do for us. To be a Matador is glorious.
Let's give a big round of applause for the Matadors. Let's hear it again for all of our wonderful trustees. Your service is greatly appreciated. This concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to say it's such an honor to work with 6 other individuals that work for children every day. Thank you guys for what you guys do. Thank you. Ms. Matheson, do we have citizens' input this evening?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay. Dr. De La Torre. Dr. De La Torre, do we have reports? Do you have any reports for us this evening?
Yes, Vice President Bustillos. We will begin with our monthly COVID update as reported by Mrs. Lindy Leeper.
Good evening, Vice President
No, thank you.
Bustillos, members of the board, and Dr. De La Torre. Hang on just a sec.
I guess we'll wait a few
Okay.
minutes until they...
So I'm sure it's no surprise we are back in the red zone. But I will point you to the fourth indicator, which is hospitalization, and the indicator we've been tracking most frequently for the Region 19 return to school plan. As you may recall, in December of 2020, our hospitalization rate was hovering around 55%. We're not even half of that yet. Maybe not ever. And then in the bottom graph, you will see that in the last 14 days, we've spent half that time in the red zone and half that time in the yellow zone. So although we're in the red zone based on last week's data, I wanted you to see this graph. So you're familiar with the one that I show you that's been, it covers the span of a year. This covers the span of a month. As you'll notice, just before, right around the Thanksgiving break, we were down around a little less than 200 cases per day on our 7-day rolling average. Around Thanksgiving or the beginning of December, we jumped up to slightly more, I'm going to put my glasses on, slightly more than 600 new cases per day. At Christmas, we dropped again. And mind you, the Times and Dr. Ocaranza's office reported that Omicron was discovered early in December. So it's fair to say Omicron was already starting to impact the community. And yet, by just before Christmas, we were experiencing green and yellow zone indicators. But now, going into this last week, we can see that we are once again approaching 800 new cases per day. Is still nowhere near where we were last year or in November of 2020 when we hit the spike with the Delta and the other variants. The other thing I'll point out to you is in the bottom right graph, that's the hospitalization rate. You can see that over the last month we have tipped or just barely exceeded 20% twice. Again, nowhere near the 55% from previous exposures to COVID. So the point of this is it's changing rapidly. It changed rapidly from great right before Thanksgiving to not so great right before Christmas or right after Thanksgiving, great right before Christmas, and now it's not so great. This might indicate that this is a quick hit flash fire effect, and then it immediately corrects itself. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that that's what the next 2 weeks of data will show us. You may also remember that we did a vaccine campaign just before the holiday break where when Pfizer came out and said we were approved, or FDA said we were approved for the Pfizer vaccine for ages 5 to 11, we started administering those at all elementary schools and the appropriate middle schools. We vaccinated quite a few people, and at that time, as you may recall, we did not just vaccinate children. We offered the vaccine to anyone in the community who needed dose 1, dose 2, a booster dose of both or both variants, so only Moderna and only Pfizer. But those were offered to the community at large. This is the second go-around, started this evening. I think we had about 800 participants between 3 and 5 p.m. today. So a good number showed up again today. And then I want to talk just briefly about the new isolation guidelines. So you may recall that around the Christmas...
Ms. Leeper?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Are you opening this round of vaccinations to the public as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All of it's open to the community. We are partnering with Immunize El Paso, and that's their vision. So all of this is open to the community.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So with regard to the new isolation guidelines, just before around Christmas, CDC came out and said the new isolation guidelines have been reduced from 10 days to 5 days. So let me just briefly talk about the difference between isolation and quarantine, because this comes up quite a bit. TEA and the Department of State Health Services all say if you have an active case of COVID, you cannot come to work and you cannot come to school. Before, you had to stay home for 10 days. Now, with regard to employees only, they only have to stay home 5 days if they meet the health criteria. And that health criteria says it's 5 days since either your symptoms first started or you had a positive test, because not everybody has symptoms. So 5 days since one of those two events, you've had improvement in symptoms, and you've not run fever in the last 24 hours or needed fever-reducing medications. If you meet those criteria and you're an employee, you may go back to work. That does not apply to students yet, but I will tell you TEA says it's imminently going to apply to students, that they anticipate revising their guidance shortly to apply that also to our youngsters. If you don't meet the health criteria, you stay home in isolation until you do. Okay? And then the Board of Trustees graciously approved in September an extension of the emergency paid sick leave. And so if you're home and you have to stay home longer than the 5 days, you get paid up to 7 days of emergency leave. So the 5 days you're covered, plus if you have to stay, an additional 2 days are covered. And then when we talk about quarantine, that's the other piece of this, and it applies to people that are contacts, close contacts or contacts with someone who has the virus. Interestingly, and I think most of us would agree, right now that's pretty well everyone. But quarantine is at the discretion of the parent or the employee. So TEA says parents get to determine if their child quarantines, not us. Because we've offered the vaccine, they have measures in place for their protection. If anyone's symptomatic, they should be staying home. But you know what? I mean, allergies, and if you live in El Paso and you don't have allergies, I would be very surprised, could be classified as a symptom of COVID. A parent knows that best. So the parent gets to make the decision about whether their child comes to school or stays home for a quarantine period. Mind you, quarantine is you've been exposed. You have come into contact with someone. But high risk is eliminated if you have a vaccine. You're not a high-risk close contact, you're just a contact. So people confuse isolation and quarantine. Isolation, you cannot come to work or school. Quarantine is at the discretion of the parent and the employee. And the employee, if they're not vaccinated, must rapid test or must test to prove that they aren't carrying or aren't experiencing COVID-19. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I had a couple of questions, and they've actually come from some constituents who have contacted me. The first one is on the COVID testing. They are concerned that they're not able to get the testing anymore here at central office. And so I was just kind of wondering if you could explain why we're not doing that anymore, or if we can ever do it again, or...
Certainly, I'm happy to address that. So as you may recall, our rapid tests were made available to us by the Texas Division of Emergency Management through TEA. That program ceased at the end of October, but that's at the same time vaccinations were offered. And so effectively they said, look, there's not this dramatic need for rapid testing because now vaccines are available for all. So they cut off our supply. Then now you have an uptick, and most of those tests are not available to me. I can't buy them anywhere. And we have a great relationship with Abbott Laboratories, and they are willing to provide them. They don't have them. And the entities that are getting those rapid tests are hospitals, emergency responders, people that deal with the very sick, cities and counties, which is also why we said, okay, then here are free testing sites. They have the test available, we don't. I did receive the question today from the media. Well, what are you going to do when President Biden makes all these available to you? Will you implement testing again? We haven't received any details of that. And generally, when it's a federal program, it flows through the state agency before it gets to me. So I would envision if that happens, TEA will implement a process whereby we are able to get access to those tests again. If Omicron is a flash fire, and there's significant data that indicates it is, I would not recommend implementing rapid testing again because they're vaccinated. Because if they've had Omicron, now they have not only a natural but a vaccinated immunity to it, so they probably have a better immune response to any of the variants of concern that may approach in the future. Plus, it was an incredible burden on our staff. And our vision, our responsibility is academics. We have the county, we have the city, we have the hospitals, the doctors, primary care physicians, all of them have those resources, and they're not readily available to us, and it's not part of our normal process. So we would prefer to protect the academic learning environment and let the medical professionals deal with testing. It's not to say we won't, but That's our preference.
Thank you. That's pretty much what I had said to this constituent, but it's just good to get it out there for anybody else who wants to know what's happening with that. The second part of his question was involving teachers not knowing whether kids in their classroom are testing positive for COVID, and then he basically explained some situation where that the teachers are in the classroom teaching, and then somebody comes in and says, you're going to have to leave the classroom for half an hour, and then, but they don't tell them who, what, why, or what's going on, and he felt like that was kind of not fair to the teacher, is what he was basically saying. Could you expand on that, maybe?
Certainly. So as you can imagine, anyone who's sick and has a medical record or incident, that information is HIPAA protected. So we never disclose individual names because we're not allowed to. But what we do as part of our health and safety plan is if a student is identified, student or teacher, anyone in the classroom is identified as having COVID. So say someone doesn't feel well, teacher says, you look to me like you have symptoms, please go to the nurse's office. Nurse tests in the office because they have a limited supply of rapid tests. Rapid test says, ooh, that one is a positive case. Immediately, we go back to the classroom and remove everyone because no one can be present when we fog. But the fogging solution addresses any potential respiratory droplets that might be resting on a table or something else. Now, CDC says that the virus doesn't live for 48 hours on surfaces anymore. That was our original information. That's not the case, but because the student or the teacher was just there and may have coughed or something else, we want to be super cautious, and so we go in immediately and fog the area.
And that is a very effective way of, because he was concerned, he said, I don't really see how you can kill the virus, with just that amount of time. I did tell him, no, that it is very possible because there's several different ways you can fumigate or whatever. But it is a good amount of time.
Yes, ma'am. It's an approved solution. It's an aerosolized, I think is how you say it, solution. And because it's such a fine mist, it doesn't soak things, but it is able to address any living particles of the virus in the air.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, I had a phone call from this lady. As a matter of fact, it happened this morning. This lady says, well, she didn't expect, she had this feeling that she needed to go get tested. And because apparently she and her son are very close, she took him with him. And it was early this morning. Well, it comes out that the little boy is negative, but the mother is positive. She gets on the phone and calls a friend of hers that they've been together over the weekend. So the lady gets on the car and goes to the YMCA on Traywood. Well, you can't get the 24-hour, the rapid response.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're talking about, she was told it was 72 hours. And my question, are we, I'm sure we are, continuing some form of communication with Dr. I don't want to misspell his name.
Ocaranza, yes, sir.
Yes, because this is very important. One lady goes in, and maybe 30 or 40, maybe let's say an hour later, then now the other lady has got to wait 72 hours. And it creates a lot of dilemma for not only the public, but when I envision our teachers and our children, it puts us all in a very precarious environment. And we as a country should not have to worry about not having sufficient. It's shame on us as a country, because, and if and I say this, if our county government and responsible is not doing, then they need to start doing something. Because this thing kills. This is not a little game that comes and goes. And so I'm asking Dr. La Torre, Ms. Leeper, as you communicate with this doctor, would you let him understand that there's a tremendous amount of urgency towards our children, and our teachers, as well as the public.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I will say that in the work that I've done with Dr. Ocaranza, he has a heart for this community.
Yeah.
But supplies are limited for them as well. It's not, it is nationwide. And I hope that with President Biden's new initiative, that will help address what's going on in our communities so that we do have rapid access once again. And I'm sorry, Dr. De La Torre.
And I will say, we met with Dr. Ocaranza this morning, and that letter of release issue surfaced, and what he had to admit was it isn't just a systems error, it's a personnel error. His entire office is out sick. And so he was supposed to come in person this morning to Region 19 to meet with us. He is the only remaining person in his office who isn't out for at least the 5 days. One of the things that we did ask him to consider is that somewhere in the template, when someone requests a release letter indicating that they are no longer positive, that there be a special tab for educators because of the implications of not having educators in the classroom, so that they'd get priority. And letters would go out to support them, to get them back in the classroom. He understands the challenges surrounding substitutes, the challenges surrounding large classrooms of more than 30 students having to be taken to the gym and supervised there because so many teachers are out and substitutes. Not that they're not available, I suspect that they're dealing with some of the same challenges as well. So he said that he would take it back and see if he could have his IT department create some kind of a template that would be specific to teachers. So we're optimistic that here in the near future he'll help us.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Leeper, I was visiting with yesterday with a constituent. She is, I guess as of today, she is on day 6 of her doctor's note. She was tested for not only COVID, but all the other things, because all those diseases, all those illnesses run the same. She has been calling every day this week, trying to find out what her status is. And the clinic that she went to now, they've told her it's the best 7 to 10 days. And so, you know, if you go to the drugstores, you can't find rapid tests. You know, you're familiar with all that. So I guess the issue is that this discussion that Dr. De La Torre is talking about, I can see some real advantages of it. And maybe that might be a way for us to address some of that. But I guess the other side of that discussion is we talked about the number of days that teachers have off or our employees have off. If you can't get a test result back from 7 to 10 days, then you're out of leave right now, just with the way the world is. I don't know. I'm just wondering if we need to go back and talk about that. And so, I know, Bobby. I don't know. Let's, I don't know. What I would like to do is propose, and obviously we can't vote on it or anything like that, but can we have a discussion, you know, and then just let us know, Dr. De La Torre, about if we add 3 more days to the paid special leave?
Sure. Yeah, we can have the discussion, but let me tell you something interesting that has been of huge benefit to Clint. Clint doesn't give any days.
Oh, really?
They don't make a distinction between someone who happens to get cancer or has to get an operation, and they have to use their own leave. So the Clint Independent School District didn't want to somehow elevate the COVID beyond some of the other situations that people find themselves in. Now, the difference is, of course, that COVID is contagious and cancer isn't, and some of the other issues. But for that person that has cancer, for that person that has diabetes or who needs surgery, the days are probably just as important as those days are to the person that feels like they either have the flu or they have COVID. And what he has found is that people that get COVID are coming back in the 3-4 days when they feel well and they meet all of the criteria that Ms. Leeper has described, whereas in other districts, including ours, El Paso, who have given 7 days and in some cases 10 days. Those employees are using all 10 days, even though it's become evident, and Dr. Ocaranza reaffirmed that if you get Omicron, typically it's 3 days, 4 days, and then you're probably ready to come back. And so we have to be very careful because as it is now, you have students for 180 days. That's 10 days. Typically, a teacher is out 11 days a year on average. Now we're at 21 days. And then you start counting the days that students are out because of circumstances at home or because they are sick or because they have been exposed. And we're going to have an academic year where some students are going to be in front of their teacher all of 100, 120 days, and they're already 2 grade levels behind. And I just feel like it would be detrimental. So one of the things, and what I was getting at, that was discussed at Region 19 is that we all have the same number of days that we make available. We all accept teachers and employees back after 5 days. We suspect that that will become true for students, and that we all need to be consistent. And the only outlier is Clint. Clint says if you get COVID, that's what you have sick leave days for. And you get 10 sick leave days a year, and so those 10 days will more than cover a 4-day, 5-day, 6-day absence. And for whatever reason, that's what their board came up with. I'm not suggesting that we do that because we've already made a commitment to 7 days.
7 days through the end of this school year, yes,
And
sir.
I think that's fair. We're also abiding by both the CDC and the local health authority that says if somebody wants to come back at 5 days and they have no symptoms, they can come back. The reality is that if a parent is notified that their child may have had close contact with somebody who tested positive for COVID, we have a lot of parents who just don't have the luxury of not going to work. So they send the child, and then we take all of the precautionary measures to isolate the child. And in some cases, even when a child has tested positive, we've had parents say, I don't know what to tell you, but I can't take care of him. He's got to go to school, and so we have to isolate or quarantine that child too. So I really think that the system we have in place mirrors what the surrounding districts have in place, with the exception of Clint. But we'd be happy to maybe come together and just have a conversation.
Dr. De La Torre, may I add something?
Yes.
One thing to keep in mind is even though it's taking up to 7 to 10 days to get the test results, if the employee meets the criteria of the 5 days post-symptom onset, 24 hours without fever, not using fever-reducing meds, and an overall improvement of symptoms, they're permitted to return to work. And once they get their test, then we reimburse them those days. So even though they're back at work and they don't have their test results, they're still getting those days. And generally, in the event that maybe they need an extended period because their symptoms are a little bit more pervasive than others, we have the opportunity for the 5 additional days through risk management. So technically, they can get up to 12 days.
Let me ask you something along that line. So an employee of ours gets a doctor's note that says they're out for 10 days,
Yes, sir.
okay? And they get their results back on day 7, all right, that it's a negative test. But the employee was actually sick and still has some very minor symptoms. Can the employee come back to work even though they have a doctor's note that says they're supposed to be out until next Tuesday?
No. So let's say that the doctor's note says they need to be out for 3 days, and our criteria is 5. We don't permit them to come back until they meet our criteria. Now, let's say the doctor's note says they can come back on the 11th, but on the 11th, they're still not feeling well. They're still not meeting the criteria of the 24 hours without fever, not using fever-reducing meds. It continues to be extended until they're feeling well enough to come back to work and meet the criteria established.
Well, with all due respect to Clint, they have different needs and concerns than us, and I understand that they have to do what they have to do, but we're a little bit different. We've always been a little bit different here at YISD. I'd like to have a discussion, DLT. So, and obviously, we got to use some common sense, and we've got to look at the money, and we got to look at, the operational impact and all those things like that. But I'd like to have that discussion sometime in the future.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Mr. Hagerty?
My community, we've been talking about Corona, and that's pretty much all we've been talking about. And it seems like everybody's on the same page when it comes to students being in the classroom with teachers. No one wants to see a return back to virtual for students. Even the teachers who have students come up to them and say, "Miss, my entire family has COVID, but I don't." And they're like, "Well, you probably do, you're just not showing symptoms." But parents I've talked to, some teachers I've talked to, is there, let's say it's not a flash fire, let's say that there is a pi or a rho or whatever comes next in the Greek alphabet, or that Delta Crom variant is real and it's not just lab contamination. Would it be worth looking at moving parent-teacher conferences online and try to restrict the amount of adult interaction as much as possible? Maybe doing teacher continuing education online or different teacher meetings that go on during the day, to limit that to Zoom meetings as much as possible, just to kind of try to reduce the exposure to adults who seem to be taking this.
Mr. Hagerty, that request had already come through. What we said is we would look at it. Our parent conferences are in February, so we would keep monitoring the data as we have been. Those are under our local control. We could move them later in the semester. That way, parents have the opportunity to meet with their teachers. It's the same with an ARD. The parent does have the right to request a virtual meeting through an ARD, or they can come face-to-face. But we are looking at the data, and we'll make the decision to move them down instead of going them virtual.
Thank you.
So, for children, they can come back after their symptoms. If they want to come back after the 5th day, they can come back, right? Obviously? No?
No, students are not yet under the 5-day rule. If a student is sick with COVID, a student is home for 10 days. They
Okay.
get the remote conferencing support
Right.
during that 10-day period, and it could actually, they could get 20 days, no more than 20 days of remote conferencing support, but they cannot come back to school at the 5th day as adults can. I think it's coming, it's imminent, but not yet.
What if they test negative
If they
after the
test-
5th day?
Okay.
So they, after the 5th day, they, say the 6th day, they go get tested and they end up negative. Can they come back to school
So why were they home to begin with?
because of COVID?
But because they're sick with COVID or because they were a contact?
No, they're sick with COVID,
Then they may not come back for the 10-day
even if they
period.
test negative.
No. Our rule, the TEA's rule and the Department of State Health Services is a 10-day rule for students as it stands today if they are recovering from COVID.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's it. Okay. No, you're good. Agenda review. Thank you. We will now discuss the agenda items as listed. Oh, Champagne, I'm so sorry. It was pretty interesting over here. We were all intrigued with the,
Good evening, Mr.
welcome, Ms. Champagne.
Good evening, everybody. We sent in the package last week to summarize all what we accomplished in 2021. So we basically catch up with all the projects already, and currently we have 10 projects going on. One of them including all the elementary schools, and one of them including with all the high schools. Okay. Well, I'm going to repeat because I wasn't clear enough. Sorry. Basically, last week's package I sent to you all has a summary of what we accomplished in 2021. So basically, we finished about 90 projects. And for now, in January, we have 10 projects going on now. Within those 10, we have one with all the elementaries and one with all high schools. So I will keep you all updated on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Do you have any question?
Mr. Rosales?
Yes, sir.
Champagne, I just want to thank you for the tremendous amount of work that you did last year.
Oh, thank you.
And the guidance that Mr. Ochoa provided, and you formulated a plan which makes it so much easier for us to understand as you present your work. And, you know, I've always mentioned the work that you do is something that sometimes people don't feel comfortable. But sometimes it's good to check the checker. And I commend you for the high quality of work that you and your staff do. And I thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I do have to thank Super's
Yes.
support and all the associates, all the directors, their help. And the principals are very, very kind and very receptive of our visit. So that I really appreciate.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Champagne.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we move to agenda review. We will now discuss the agenda items listed in the post notice to regular meeting of YISD Board of Trustees for January 12th, 2022, and related recommendation motions with the superintendent and executive cabinet, and receive responses to questions and/or request of additional information through the superintendent in preparation for deliberation and action on said items at the January 12th, 2022 regular Board of Trustees meeting. Please stop me if you wish to discuss or pull an item. Consent. Minutes of Board of Trustees workshop, regular board meeting, December 15, 2021, 6 p.m. Monthly financial updates as of November 2021. Pulled consent agenda items. Donation to Del Valle High School.
Mr. Bustillos?
Yes.
Can we go ahead and pull that so we can acknowledge this? Because this is not the same donation as last month,
No.
correct?
I think we only have just one, so it's automatic.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Policy items, revision of policy FEC local attendance for credit.
I did have a question on that. Brenda, on the item on policy FEC local, how are you rolling that out to the schools?
Actually, if approved tonight, we have leadership tomorrow. Mr. Jim Vasquez and his team are going to roll that out with our schools tomorrow. In addition, he has, I believe, 2 support sessions next week with our APs, with our attendance committees, to roll this out.
Okay, thank you.
Action items. Approval of amendment to YSD contract 2022-0005 with MNK Architects, Inc. Any questions? No. The order agenda has been approved. May I have an electronic motion and a second on the remaining consent agenda items listed on this agenda as recommended by administration?
Mr. Vice President, I move to approve the consent agenda items as listed on this agenda.
Okay.
Are we voting right now, or are we going, is this the agenda review?
This is, yeah, this is the agenda review to approve it. Okay.
Gotcha.
I have a motion by Ms. Woodruff.
Did we do something wrong?
Motion by Ms. Woodruff, and 5 yeses. Now we have that pulled. Now, pulled consent agenda items. Donation to Del Valle High School using your electronic hand. Is there any question, any discussions? Mr. Sotero?
Since Trustee Lucero was not able to be here, we'd like to thank Mario Diaz and Associates for their wonderful contribution to Del Valle High School, their Systems Club, in the amount of $5,000. That's a very, very kind donation, and we appreciate your support in supporting our students and our schools. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else? No? No further discussions. May I have a motion? Mr. Ramirez was a mover.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, I move to approve a donation to the district for the benefit of Del Valle High School Systems Club in the amount of $5,000 from Mario E. Diaz and Associates.
Thank you. Is that everybody? There. And this is approved 5-0. Now, on to our policy items. Revision of policy EFC, attendance for credit, using your electronic hand. Is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion?
Mr. Vice President, I move to approve TASB update number 118, recommended revisions and Ysleta-specific revisions to policy FEC, attendance for credit as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Woodruff. And it passes 5-0. Now on to our action items. Approval of amendment to YISD contract 20220005 with MNK Architects, Inc., using your electronic hand. Is there any discussion? Mr. Ramirez?
Ms. Sleeper, if you could find a few dollars to fix the seats in the theater, that would be wonderful too, so.
I'll see what I can do, sir.
If no further discussion, may I have a motion? We're not getting it. It's not up.
It is now.
Okay. In a second. No, you're good. And it is approved 5-0. You made the motion.
You need to do the motion.
No, it's Mr. Rosales.
Mr. Rosales made the motion.
Yeah, I move to approve amendment to YISD contract 20220005 with MNK Architects Incorporated for the replacement of the original electrical switchgear located at YISD Administration Building, including other remodeling based on the needs assessment in the facility plan at the rate of 7.5% of actual construction costs, contingent upon final negotiations, in-house council review, and Form 1295 certificate of interested parties.
Thank you, Mr. Rosales. Now, closed session. The Board of Trustees has determined that a closed meeting of the Board of Trustees is required to discuss the items set forth in the posted agenda for this date. Such closed meeting is authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Section 551.001, including but not limited to the sections and purpose covered by the following section of Texas Government Code. 551.071, 72, 73, 74, 76, 82, 127, 821, 83, and 84. Should any actions or decisions or vote be required with regards to any matter considering the closed session, the final action, decision, or vote shall be in open meeting, or subsequent to public meeting with notice. The board will now go into closed session in the Rio Grande Room at 7:10. I reconvene this meeting of the Board of Trustees with Sotero Ramirez, Mr. Sotero Ramirez, Mr. Shane Haggerty, Mr. Mike Rosales, Mrs. Connie Woodruff, and myself at 8:15. Discussion and possible action to approve the resolution of Lopez versus YSD cause number 2020 DCV 3369. May I have a motion?
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, I move to approve the proposed resolution of this case as discussed in closed session.
We have a motion by Ms. Connie Woodruff. There it is. And it's four yes, 1 no. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.